Okay, so we can now grab these cubes and throw them around, but let's make a reset button so we can learn a little bit about making a button and using raycasting. So the first thing you need to do is go install Playmaker per the videos for Unity Scene 1, and then come back to this video and start from this point. Hey, you're back. So what we're going to do is create a canvas, just like we did in the info floating thing. So UI canvas. We have to put that canvas into world space, same as before. Now I have some settings that'll get it right behind the table for you. So if you go -9 position X, 1.5 Y, 0 Z, 1000 width, 500 height, rotation Y would be -90, and then our scale we want 0.002 and 0.002. Oops, one was a little smaller there. 0.002. Okay, there it is. So you see it's right behind our table, and so that's nice and perfect enough for us. So now we have to add a button to it. So I can simply, if you actually just right-click on something, you'll make it a child instantly. So I'm just going to go to UI button. I wanted to use Text Mesh Pro, but for whatever reason the text isn't rendering for me, and I just kind of gave up. But we have our button here, so we want to scale it up a little bit, right? Let's make it a little bigger. There we go. Let's open it up, click on its text, and let's say reset cubes. That's great. We could change the colors of the button, like right when it's just sitting there unclicked. If I wanted to make it let's make it like a greenish, I'll make it like an orangish color. We could change the text. Well, right now that's just kind of the sitting state. We can go when like you have it pressed, selected, disabled. So you'd set all these. I'll just leave it like this. It's fine. So the next thing that we need to do is we want to make our laser. Okay, and so our Raycaster, which is essentially like a laser, we're figuring out what's happening. So I selected the canvas, and you'll see this has this graphic Raycaster by default. We want to remove that component, and what we want to actually do is type in Raycaster here and look for the OVR Raycaster to use. Okay, so that's our first step right there. We've replaced the default Raycaster with the Oculus Raycaster. Then over in your hierarchy, well, in your project settings, go into the project here and look for something called UI helpers. Here it is right here, UI helpers, and drag that into your scene. And so if you open that up, you'll see that it has this laser pointer. The sphere is actually the thing that like lets you know you're touching something. And then there's this event system. And notice when you make a canvas, it creates an event system by default. It didn't for me because I had already put on a canvas, but you should have another event system in your hierarchy. Go ahead and delete that one because we're going to use this new UI helpers event system here. Okay, so what we want to do is go back to the canvas here, and you see it says what's the pointer for our OVR Raycaster. We want this laser pointer right here, and just grab it into there. And now we're pretty much done. We can go ahead and run this, and we'd have a Raycaster, we'd have a laser. Of course, it's not making the buttons go, but let's set up the laser a little better. So if we click on laser pointer here, we could change, what we want to do is click this line renderer. We want to see it. So we're going to click the line renderer, and now we'll be able to see the laser emanating from our controller or our hand. And of course it'll always be there. To actually have it only show up when you're hitting something, you'd have to do a little coding. I can't figure out how to do it without coding, so we're going to ignore it. And as far as its color, we can click down here in color, and I'm going to give it, I'm going to leave it going to white at the end. You get this gradient thing. I'm going to make it maybe like a pinkish color here. There we go. So it feels more lasery, and let it fade to white, because it'll really basically fade to nothing is what will happen when it's fading to white. And so that's cool. So we have our laser set up. And now the last thing we have to do is make our button functionality. So we're going to get our button, select our button, right? And we're going to go into Playmaker. And here we're going to basically do a lot like we did last time, right? So we're going to right click and add an FSM. We're in the start state. I'm going to call it listener. And it's going to have an event that is called clicked, right? So we'll call it clicked. So I add an event, go over here to listener, add a transition. I've got clicked. Once it's clicked, it's going to go into a state, and so we're going to call that state reset cubes, right? It really doesn't matter what you call these things, but it's just nice to name it something good. And again, you're going to wait for that to be finished and go back to the listener. So when we're clicked, we go to reset cubes. As soon as they reset the cubes, we go back and just listen for us to click the button again. That's the logic layer. So now we need the event layer, kind of the things that happen, the action layer, I should say. So in listener, the action that we want is that the button gets clicked. So there's a nice simple one for that called, well, let me just type in button, and it's called UI button on click event. So I'll go ahead and double click that and add it here. Use self. The send event is clicked, right? We send clicked and we go to this. So now we'll click on reset cubes, and what we need to do is then make our cubes reset. Now we could do things like variables and collect the variable first, and just, again, I'm trying to keep you away from too many coding things, so we'll just do it the most manual way by just cutting and pasting the values here. So in Action Browser, the first thing I want to set for each cube is set position. So set position, right? And this will give us our X, Y, Z in world space. So how do I find its position? Well, I gotta go, I'll just do cube 3. So I'll select cube 3, right? And I'll just cut and paste these values. So I cut and paste the X value, go back to my button and my thing here. So now to be able to put a thing here rather than a variable, you click this button and I'll say that, go back to cube 3, button here, this gets clicked, and back one last time to that, and back to button, click it, and that's Z. So that's setting it back to that position. One thing you'll notice I forgot to do first, which I probably should have done first, was say let's specify our game object, right? Because I'm using cube 3, and so I'm going to go ahead and grab cube 3 and here it's there. Now I should also set its rotation, because when I throw it, it can be rotated. So if I go to Action Browser and I start typing in set, you'll see set rotation. The nice easy thing about this is these cubes are 0, 0, 0, so I'm just going to kind of click, 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 so they're all 0, 0. So now what you would do is obviously add the other 2 cube items, right? So set the position and rotation of cube 2 this time, right? So we have set rotation, whoops. I forgot to set everyone. You have to set the game object for. So you'll have 3 set positions: cube 1, cube 2, cube 3. 3 set rotations: cube 1, cube 2, cube 3. And that's it. We would be able right now to run this to the Oculus and reset those. And that's what we're going to do, I think, next to complete this scene.